Hi everyone, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. We are SheSays London, and we are talking about the cost of care this morning. So for those of you who don't know about SheSays, I'm just going to give you a little press lead. SheSays is a community-based organisation. We're global. We're actually live in, I think, 55 cities across the world, and we have about 70,000 members. And it was founded 15 years ago for the purpose of advancing gender equality in kind of the creative industries, really just providing community support and resources for women looking to kind of navigate the challenges of work and life. So today we're going to be talking about the cost of care, specifically looking at kind of the juggle between managing a career and motherhood and general caring responsibilities. So my name is Jayshree. I'm the co-president for SheSays London this year, and I'm going to pass you over to Amy, who's my other president.
Hi everybody. So we're here to really dig into the cost of care. Generally, media really portrays the young and child-free woman as more attractive and more high value, whilst mothers and carers tend to be depicted as unattractive, old, problematic to business aims, and paradoxically, once you're a little bit older and maybe child-free, suddenly you can feel quite shamed for that as well. And so this is an opportunity for us to open up some dialogue around that, and hopefully to try and create some pathways that will make it a lot easier for females collectively to thrive in the industry. And even if you're not a caregiver at the moment, chances are at some point in time you will become one, whether that's caring for somebody older, somebody that you know, or having a child that you're looking after. And so perhaps we can start by looking at a few stats as well, which can really help us to get some context around today and how things are looking. 1 in 8 adults are carers, so that's around 6.5 million people. And every day another 6,000 people actually get added to that, so that's a huge number. And over 1 million of those people actually care for more than one person. 58% of carers are women, and almost 3 in 1 adults have left or considered leaving their job because of caring duties. And actually that's particularly difficult and a bigger problem for women. And nearly 1 in 10 carers actually sandwich care, so that means they're not only caring for someone younger, like a child, but also somebody older too. So there's a lot more going on than can seem on the surface. And 50% of carers that are from ethnic minorities say that their caring responsibilities have actually held them back from progressing with their careers. So that's also very interesting to look at from an intersectional point of view. So given these statistics, I think with the wonderful panellists that we have here today, it'd be really good for us to learn from your lived experiences. I know we have a mixture of mothers here as well as those that are caring for elderly parents as well. So it would be good to just hear how you manage to balance, working in the creative industries with those care duties and how complex that has become over the years, or not. I'll do quick intros for each of you. So starting with Jade Tomlin here, who is the Group Creative Director at AKQA. She was named, in the last 5 years, she's been named the Creative Equals and Campaign's 30 Future Female Leaders, as well as being selected for Cannes Lions See It Be It, and featured in campaigns Faces to Watch and campaign Trailblazers of the Future. She's also been a judge for campaign Big Awards and D&AD New Blood. We also have Keiddy, right here, Keiddy Cruz, who is a singer and songwriter from Colombia, who's in the UK and is also part of D&AD's Shift programme for this year. Thanks for being with us. And Laraib Atta, who is a digital compositor and public speaker. Laraib is Pakistan's first and youngest female visual effects artist in Hollywood. She's worked across a myriad of major releases, including the Oscar-nominated James Bond, No Time to Die, as well as other credits including Doctor Who, Sandman, The Dark Crystal, Mission Impossible, the list does go on. And she works at Industrial Light and Magic as a digital compositor whilst being a mum and a speaker. And we also have Kaia Charles, who is the Senior Cultural Projects Manager at Now Gallery. Kaia commissions projects that explore urbanism, digital and cross-cultural visual culture. Examples include art and architectural interventions for the public realm, such as Conrad Shawcross's Optic Cloak, as well as the physical and digital festival Turning Tides and the Panellists Presents digital series. She was previously at the Victoria and Albert Museum's Contemporary Programmes section, curating a variety of arts commissions and creative industries events, and is a mother of 2 children. Thank you all for being here with us. And I think we'll dive into some questions. So perhaps just starting with your actual just lived experience at the moment and how your care duties have impacted how you are seen and heard, both at work and in the world. Can you remember looking back at your favourites, your first favourite TV mum, and how that impacted and shaped your idea of what being a carer or mother was supposed to become, apparently, and seeing that? Jade?
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, this is a really interesting question. I had to really think about this one. I mean, for me, funny enough, I'd probably pick One Fine Day. I'm not sure if anyone has seen that movie with Michelle Pfeiffer and George Clooney, but I think I always knew from a fairly young age that I wanted to, work hard. I loved art. I think, as a teenager, graphic design, art, I knew I was going to go into that sort of industry. And so watching that movie and seeing Michelle Pfeiffer, even though, there was an element of perhaps hecticness and chaos where she was looking after her child as a single mom, George Clooney was doing the same. There were struggles, but she was doing it, and it was possible. And just seeing that on screen, I was like, great, it might be hard, but she's doing it. I reckon I'll be able to do it in later life, so that's probably my main one.
Hi everyone. That's a really cool question. I had to take some time to think about it. I guess from when I was younger, one of my favorite TV shows was Gilmore Girls, and Lorelai Gilmore was actually a mom that I really looked up to because she understood the sort of relationship that I aspired to have with my daughter as well. Sort of being respected as a mother, but also being their friend when needs be. Then I'm British Colombian, so I was born and raised here, but I come from a Colombian background. I also grew up watching Modern Family, so Gloria, who's the single mum in that show. It's kind of like a stereotype portrayal of what a Latin woman was, and so seeing that was a bit sort of, I didn't know how to handle I really appreciate the strength and perseverance that she shows being a single parent, because that's what I am. I have a 3-year-old daughter and I've raised her thus far by myself. But then I didn't want to fit into this stereotype that's being portrayed in the media of what, a fiery Latin woman that's just looking to get money from an old rich white man. I didn't want to be that, but I did want to sort of maintain that strength that was shown. Definitely the women in my life inspire me a lot in terms of being a mother, and that definitely strength from Latin women really resonates with me. But yeah, I guess those two. And then Mrs. George from Mean Girls is probably not the best portrayal of motherhood. It was still something to laugh at, and I guess that's not what we want to be seen as or known as, but it was still interesting. And Elastica from The Incredibles. I think she was great. She was great.
Thank you so much for having me here. I think looking back, I couldn't think of any film. Well, I always looked up to my mother, just as a role model for myself. But I could only think of this one film, Matilda, which I absolutely loved. Of course, it's the parents were best. But she had a teacher who I made to look into her as she was the one who unlocked the potential, the real potential in Matilda. So I think those are the things which you actually learn, that when you become a mom or a parent, how how with your children you could be around them, and how could you raise them up and be more open to listening to what they have to say, even very tiny little bit of advice. It's so nice and inspiring to even hear from your kids. That's what I'm learning from my son. Sometimes their perspective it's really deep. So I think it's just being about being more open and listening to your kids, and I think it really unlocks their potential in some way.
For me, I grew up in the Caribbean and in Dominica and in Barbados, and we watched a lot of cable TV, and one of the programs that we grew up watching was The Cosby Show. So I know it's problematic from a Bill Cosby point of view, but for the show, Shad was, I think, quite a role model for lots of young black girls, and also just reflected the family structure, aspirational of the Caribbean family, really. So career-driven, both parents often working, you know, just that aspiration to have a nice home, you know, looking after the kids and working through problems. So that was one of the first, I think, that really stuck with me.
That so resonates. I absolutely loved Felicia, and definitely really interesting hearing each of those shows and things that capture our imagination and make us think around, you know, the kind of, you know, woman we want to become or not be, etc., and how we can care for others around us who are not necessarily our own as well. So how does, it'd be good to hear kind of how motherhood is fitting in with your career right now. I guess, you know, recently with COVID, that was probably a really good opportunity for people to finally see, you know, how difficult it is for people who are caring for young adults, especially young children. Sorry. But I guess, you know, unfortunately, women were the same people that were more likely to be furloughed or to lose their jobs. So that was quite problematic, but equally it did, as I say, help, you know, others to see, especially men, you know, how difficult things can be. Could you share a little bit around your context and how it's been for you really in terms of fitting together? How do you fit together care duties with work?
Sure. So I think my setup's slightly different in the sense that my wife gave birth to our two children, so I have a 7-month-old and a 2.5-year-old. So I guess I kind of have like a bit of a two-pronged lens or perspective on how kind of, you know, parents are kind of treated as such. But I think during COVID, you know, our son was born and then literally we went into lockdown that weekend. It was like a couple of days, so it was just like overjoyed, but then just like, what is going on in the world? So it was a really strange time. But, you know, I think it's really important to kind of have support networks, whether, you know, whatever kind of your setup is, whether it's NCT groups, making friends with other parents at work. You might not even particularly get on with that person, but I think you will find common ground and you'll learn interesting lessons and different ways to kind of cope with different situations that arise. I think it gets really difficult when you kind of, almost go into a bit of your own space and go like, oh, you know, they're not going to understand. It's really important to keep talking about your truth and what's happening when things are difficult. Like, you know, AKQA, I'm always really sort of open and honest with my boss. Like, if one of the children are ill and I feel like it should be me to take the time to be with them, go and collect them or take them to a vaccine because my wife has done it like the last couple of times, I'll just WhatsApp him and we have that, we've built that relationship where he knows I'm going to get the work done. And I think that, you know, it's really important to build those relationships with people that you're working with, and obviously the relationship at home, that level of time and care that's needed on both sides, like, doesn't sort of slow down. So you kind of just have to work on a needs basis. Right now my son needs me, right now I need to be at that shoot. So it's kind of how I've dealt with the duties so far.
Honestly, I've kind of struggled to balance everything. I think my life has sort of been around that sense of balancing, being a single mother and trying to navigate my career. I definitely agree with you in terms of like building that sense of community. I feel is so important, especially during a time like COVID. It was a very isolating experience, no pun intended, but during that time, I started in the Latin music industry here in the UK in 2018, but a few months later I fell pregnant, and so I had to take a step back, and that stopped my career completely because I became a single mum, and I had no idea what I was doing, so I had to figure it out along the way. Then during COVID, one of my birthdays, my family got me a home studio set up, so at my home I set everything up. So I basically, when my daughter was sleeping, I would record in the bedroom and send everything online, and just make sure that just because I had this responsibility, it wasn't stopping me from doing what I actually wanted to do. When I found out I was pregnant a few weeks later, my father passed, and it made me realize like it's so important to actually make sure that you're doing something that makes you happy in your life. Unfortunately, his death was something that made me realize that and set that perspective for me. So even though I was struggling with this new journey of motherhood, I realized that I didn't want to let it stop me from doing what I really wanted to do. And so when COVID, when the pandemic, when the pandemic kind of passed, I just took my daughter with me everywhere. I would let people know like she was coming with me to the shoot. I have no one to take care of her because I only have my mum here, and she lives in Colombia most of the time, and that's the only help I have. So I just had to take it upon myself to sort of take her to shoots. And I remember this one person who's actually an A&R director at a music label. They said to me that you would be really big and you would excel in your career if you weren't a mum. And I was like, I'm going to prove you wrong. I'm going to prove you wrong. And so yeah, I took her with me to everything: music video shoots, songwriting sessions, everything. And now I managed to establish myself as a songwriter in the Latin music scene, but I'm sort of entering the commercial creative industry now through DNAD Shift's program. But in order to find work, I needed childcare, and in order to get childcare, I needed money, and in order to get money, I needed work. So it was just this endless loop, and I couldn't figure it out. So it actually got to the point after a really long time that I had to decide to let my mum take my daughter to Colombia so that I could finish my shift course. So at this point in time, it's the longest time I've been away from her. She's been away for about 3 months. But because I have that relationship with my mother, and because I was honest with the people at DNAD about my situation, it's been okay, and I've been supported. And now I get to do this without stressing about picking her up or having to get home. And I have my showcase for DNAD, and I managed to do my course. And yes, I'm grateful for the people that I have around me, but it is tough. It is really hard to find this balance, and I feel that there needs to be way more put in place in order to help women and non-binary people like us be able to do what we actually want to do without obstacles.
I think it's amazing that you're able to really integrate your daughter in that way. And I think it's kind of interesting right now how artists, for example, are able to always have a bit of activism with the work that they're creating. And I only hope that perhaps, that could be a bit of an edge for you at some point, kind of creating a space for, others that are balancing care duties, But I think it's super cool that you were able to do that. And just wanted to mention. And I think your predicament is very interesting because you not only have your son, you're not only a single mum, but you care for your elderly mother also. So we'd love to hear from you. How has everything been?
Yeah, it's such an inspiring experience. Honestly, you're such an hard lady. It's been difficult, absolutely, being a single mom. And when I got married, I moved to Spain for some time, and I completely stopped working at that time. I'd lived there a few years, and once I gave birth, I moved back to UK, and that was the time I was looking for work, and I was struggling really badly. I couldn't get back into the industry when I had like easily 5-year gap in my career. I couldn't find work. I was applying at all the big, small companies. I was on LinkedIn day and night, just adding recruiters, agents, and all sorts of artists and senior lead people, and I would just message everyone, just trying to introduce myself, send my CV and show it, which was already outdated, and I was like, how will I get through this? So just on LinkedIn one day, I was looking for, again, scrolling through, just looking for opportunities, and someone posted about a course they had at this organization called Next Gen Skills Academy, and they just built this program for women in the VFX industry, animation industry, help and support for them. And I quickly applied, and I got accepted. And when I went through it, I started to get back into the circle again, and I started to speak to other women who were going through likewise issues and problems. And then one day through that, there was a networking event happening. I went on to that again, helping and supporting women in the industry. And there was this person, she was a producer at DNX Studio, back then, which is one of the best VFX companies, Oscar-winning companies. So as soon as she introduced herself, I went straight up to her and I said, I'm looking for work, are you hiring? And then she goes, yeah, you can go online and apply through our portal. And I said, no, that's not working for me. I'm struggling, I've had a gap, I've got a son, I'm really, really struggling getting back into the industry. And then she's like, okay, here, take my details and email me everything you have, and I'll see what I can do. So as soon as I went home, I emailed through everything I had, and then a few days later I got the interview. And then after that, I was hired by the company. And then from then onwards, I was able to work on some of the big projects like Mission Impossible and some films like 007 and Tenet, which won an Oscar. And it was just an incredible journey from then onwards. But it had an impact on my marriage on the other way, and I became a single mother, and that became really difficult for me. And thank God for my mother. She lives with me. She's been looking after. She's been helping. In fact, she's been the rock, helping me with supporting with my son. But of course, she's had her health issues and stuff and everything, which I've been tried to be the caregiver as much as I could. But at the same time, during the pandemic, it became really difficult because I started working from home. I lost my job at that point, and that was a time when I was struggling, and I was like, I just want to take some time out. I literally took 4 months off and just spend more time with my son. And after that, the big studio, Industrial Light and Magic, they approached me and they were like, we're hiring, and that was like, again, the biggest highlight for me to go and join such a great studio, George Lucas company. And then it's been difficult because when I was working from home, I was dealing with everything in one place. For me, there was no divide between work and family. So that became really, really overwhelming. But I had managed that somehow because I think things like this is so important when we do build a support structure. And the same thing was happening in the company I was working. They were being more open to having dialogue and discussions about who's struggling at home and where we can give more support. And we had formed a group for women in the company to help and support them. And I think that was one thing that really, really helped everyone come together and speak about their issues. I think that's stuff like that really gets you through. But yeah, that's.
Thanks for sharing that, and yeah, I can't agree more. I think, just the role and responsibility the industry and businesses have, and individuals, how we can contribute by, creating initiatives like this one and others, programs that got you through the door as well.
Yeah.
And, being honest with people. I love that you were just very honest with that woman, and that allowed her to see you and do something, So, yeah, that's great. Thank you for sharing that. Kaia.
Yeah, I think for me, the last 2, maybe 3 years has been really a shift in my kind of personal circumstances. In a similar vein to you, I have recently become divorced, and that has obviously had a massive impact on both my children, but especially the younger one who is 12 years old. So I've got an older daughter who's 21, and then the 12-year-old who is now, basically we have a kind of shared custody agreement. So having to kind of navigate that has been really kind of a minefield. For work, I think I've had to be really honest with them. I've had to really sit down with my managers and like explain where I'm at with certain points in my life, because I think it's important that for them to understand that there is potentially a need for flexibility when it comes to my younger son. And they actually at one point even offered accommodation to me, like whilst I was doing intensive event builds. And I thought that was just quite amazing that they gave us accommodation on site. And my son does tend to come with me to all the events. And it's that kind of level of understanding. I think we've got a lot of women in our organisation, quite a few of them are moms, so there's a kind of general understanding that although we are needing to be on site because it's exhibitions and events based, a lot of what we do, that there does need to be a degree of understanding and flexibility. And you know, we have a lot of open discussions about, you know, where everyone's at. Some people just come back off maternity and just navigating that as well. But it's always been a kind of complex situation for me in motherhood, I feel. I mean, just being really honest, I had my first child in my last year of university, so that was a lot for me to navigate. I did finish my degree, which was amazing, but I did struggle that, like after that, you know, I was not able to find a job with the young baby. I kind of come to this country for education, and I never planned to kind of stay here. So there was this kind of situation where I didn't have family here. And so I actually left my daughter in my mom's care. My mom was in Nigeria at the time. She's not from Nigeria, but they were working in that country. So, yeah, I mean, I think there's just been a lot of different shifts and different almost chapters when I look at motherhood. And so now this is a whole new chapter for me, navigating being a single parent and having to meet the needs of my son, really. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that. And it's, I guess, like you were talking about the different chapters and probably seeing how industry has maybe become more flexible and understanding things. It would be great to hear if you each knew your rights at work, you know, when you became pregnant, and also just, you know, how you actually felt, if there was any apprehension or just generally how you felt around having those initial conversations at work. You know, today you can get things like flexible working that we've spoken about. So you can actually also get support from your government to actually, whether you're working or not, you can get benefits that you're absolutely paying for already through your taxes. So things like this we can easily forget and feel like, you know, maybe you shouldn't be claiming, but actually you ought to. So it'd be good to hear. Jade.
Yeah. I guess one of the newest ones is shared parental leave. And when I was initially kind of spoken to about it with HR, I kind of thought, oh, that's not for us, but thank you. And then speaking to, we're part of a sort of rainbow family group, and speaking to some of the parents there, there's two dads, and they were explaining to me, oh, you should really have another look at it. Like when you break it down, it basically means that both of you have time off with the child. And then I was like, oh, hang on a minute, and then tried to work out like the bumps and the maths to it, and it was quite a logistical time. And yeah, and then actually my wife wasn't enjoying where she was working, and she decided that she was going to switch job. And then I was like, hang on a minute, I could actually take 3 months here and enjoy, you know, that time. So that's what I did in the end. But I mean, even with that, you sort of feel like, you know, will it affect work? What will happen? And even though you're gifted that time, I think you constantly have a bit of a, you feel like, do I have a bit of a target on my back, but being, you know, taking the time out. But I think you have to just go for it, because if us as millennials, like, we're not, you know, going and showing that you can go, take that time and come back and continue working, continue doing your career, then nothing will ever change. So yeah, so that was the main one. But I think a lot of the time I sort of just muddle through. I think a lot of people are the same, as and when things come up. Like when my son was in the hospital when he was very young, he hurt his ankle, and I wasn't sure how much paid leave I would get, and just sort of kind of work with HR, and a lot of it is discretionary, so something to kind of be aware of. But I think, you know, big companies, they definitely should be not putting that back on the parents. Like, you know, as long as you're coming back, you're making sure that you're doing the work, then I think that we should be having businesses that are filled with kindness, like more and more so. Like the way in which the world is going, like we need businesses to be kind. So yeah, hopefully there'll be more of that.
For showing that. Yeah, I think it's super interesting just to almost, in our organisations and spaces, actually observing how they do treat other carers as a sign, really, of how you might get treated. And in a recent survey, a quarter of the people who answered said that they were actually treated negatively when they returned to work. So it is a legitimate concern that people have. And so, I mean, we can't always at all plan ahead, but it's good to kind of just know, you know, where you want to work on, you know, values that they have and that sort of thing. Katie, be great to hear from you.
Thank you. I completely agree with everything that you said. I think there is a bit of a lack of empathy within bigger businesses. I remember I worked for McLaren Automotive as a PR executive for a bit. That was sort of one of my first jobs within the commercial creative industry, I guess. But at the end of my time there, because I really struggled, there wasn't really any support in terms of me being a mother. I had to, most of the time I would ask to work from home because I had to take care of my daughter at the same time, because although the government does offer help, initially for a child, you only really start getting help for a child above 3. My daughter was 2 at the time, so they only offered me, there's this thing called FEET funding, and they offered me 15 hours of free childcare, but that really only meant 3 hours a day. Is it 15 hours? No, so I think it was less, but I basically could only leave her at nursery for 3 hours a day. And that is not enough to be able to work a full day. So I would have to ask anyone to help me at that point, friends, family. And at the end of my time at McLaren, it was very disheartening, because even though I put in as much work as possible and I really delivered what I needed to, you know, I helped set them up, helped with their TikTok account, I helped with photo shoots, I helped with a lot of things, internal communications, everything, whilst taking care of my daughter right there and then. And at the end of it, they were just like, you know, you should really think about your priorities, and, you know, I think you just need to be a mum right now. And I was like, that's not fair. Like, that's, why does it have to be all put on me? I understand that she is my sole responsibility, but back in the day, like, it did take a village to raise a child, right? It's hard navigating this by yourself. It's so difficult, especially like, there's this whole stereotype around being a single parent and you're really looked down on. But the reality is we're trying just as hard as everybody else to make it work, if not even harder. And so when there's not things put in place to help us, or at least to look at us in a positive way, it really puts a strain on what our own thoughts of our capabilities are. Because after that I was like, maybe I shouldn't be working. Like, if I don't have the help, if I don't have the support, if I don't have the time, if I don't have the money, how am I actually going to make this work? And right now I have a role as a junior creative, I'm trying to get back into PR now that my daughter's older. I'm entitled to more hours of childcare. But during my interviews, I sort of asked these companies, and one of my main sort of, I guess, boundaries and what I look for in a company is that there are people from families and working mothers there, so that there is this understanding, there is that empathy, and there is maybe something put in place. Like, I would rather have a remote job, like I would rather work from home so that I don't have to deal with that issue again, like, because I know I can deliver work. But it is still tough trying to figure out, how am I going to how am I going to drop my daughter off at nursery, how am I going to pick her up at the end of the day and work in the middle and get to work on time and leave on time. So I feel like there does need to be more put in place. That's it really, I guess. But yeah, that's kind of, I'm still struggling a little bit, but trying to make it work and change that view on mothers in the industry.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think it's so important to have that support structure available everywhere. I think even in the house or with your family and at workplace, in business, everywhere, it's so needed because I feel like there's such a shift happening, and I feel like our rules are switching. The women are taking the lead and working, and I do believe when it was the other way, men naturally would get support and help from everywhere because that's expected and that's the rule. But then now the rules, if it's switched, then I don't think we get the same amount of support and that help structure that was built for men in general. So it's very, very, very difficult for us to break those barriers and get through this. So it's been a struggle for me, of course, but I think one thing where I come from Pakistan, and my upbringing it was so strict. My dad had strict rules, and it was I had a very strict upbringing. I was very quiet, shy, and reserved, and I used to be in my own. I loved art and design, and I would just I would meditate a lot, and we got in meditation from a very young age, praying 5 times, and as Muslims do. So I think that became my strengths. I could build my own self in a strong way, that I could see strength in me, that I didn't need to hear from someone else that you can either do this or you can do that. So I think that was built in me from the beginning. I didn't need anyone's approval, that I didn't need to know from people, oh, you can do this, or even being in a very misogynist culture, it's more or less like, oh, you're a woman, you can't do this. You're not allowed to do this. I didn't let that affect me at all. So I think that's kept me going this far. And my mom, I've always looked up to her. She's always been there, supporting me, helping. And again, as I just mentioned earlier, going back into the industry was such a struggle. And again, it was a woman who was there for me to get me through the door. I have just such a strong belief now. These are the things. This is why I actively get involved in these events, because I've seen such an impact of this happening on others, people who are struggling, who are not represented. And it's the same thing in Pakistan. I go there, I do masterclass or talks and stuff just to help build that support structure. I think I can contribute a little bit wherever I can. So it's so absolutely needed. I don't think otherwise it will be possible for us to have a proper, normal, happy life, a normal, balanced life like this without the structure and support structure. Yeah.
I just wanted to touch a little bit on, because you're talking about rights and more resources really that may be available to carers at work. And recently my son had an accident, and I had really not looked into the healthcare that work provided. And I've learned now that actually I can add my kids onto a policy and pay kind of a small monthly contribution, but it's definitely something that I am working with them to do. In addition to that, we've had colleagues that have had, and myself included, just needing to talk to somebody, in terms of mental health, and there are schemes in place through workplaces, and it's worth just checking what those are and how you can get involved or get support. I think that's really important. Not really something that you think about until you're really impacted by it. So I'd encourage everybody to kind of look into it.
Amazing, thank you for those insights. Definitely, those are things that can be very hidden until, like you say, and that's great to hear. It would be good to hear how you feel you're actually represented in media today. Do you think you're adequately represented as a carer? And what do you find, if anything, is problematic or is improving? So it would be great to hear your perspective.
Yeah, I guess, in the mainstream, not so represented. But I think it is getting better, and I think if anyone is LGBTQI plus mum or dad, you will find places and you will find resources. It just there's not as many. But yeah, for me, there is an incredible comedian called Jen Brister. I don't know if anyone's heard of her, but she's she's very, very good. And she brought out a book called The Other Mother. And it was just perfect timing. It was 6 months before first son was born. So I kind of really took a lot of sort of warmth, just hearing her perspective and being able to kind of relate to it. And then I think in terms of books and things that have become so much better. Another great female author, Lottie Jeff, she's brought out a book called Magic Families, where it talks about all different kinds of families in a very kind of fun, genuine way. So it's great to be able to read that to the children and feel like it's just picking up any other book for them to bring in. And then you start to notice, I think recently Peppa Pig even brought into Polar Bear Mums, which is quite nice, and there's 2 crabs that are together in Dougie, and you start to sort of see it, particularly more for the children, which I think is super important, and great to kind of be coming more to the surface and more into the mainstream.
Was it about representation in the media?
How do you feel represented at the moment?
I feel like I haven't really seen anything in mainstream media that I would resonate enough with. I found out I was pregnant when I was 5 months along, and I had no idea what to expect from pregnancy, what to expect from giving birth, because what you see on TV is, your water breaks and you're rushed to the hospital and you pop out a baby. But I was not prepared for what was happening. And I feel like, there just wasn't enough representation in the media of what parenthood actually was, especially postpartum. I didn't know how difficult it would be to get used to my new body, the realities of being a new mum and how scary it is, and the raw, honest truth. I never really saw that, and I wasn't prepared enough, even if I went to parenting classes and all of that. I wish I had seen myself more in the media. I guess, like I mentioned before, I saw mums on TV, but I wish there had been more campaigns like the Mother Care campaign, where you saw real bodies of postpartum women. Because I was not prepared for my body the way that it was afterwards. Now I love it. I call them my tiger stripes. They're a mark of my strength. But I think there should be more. I think there definitely should be more. I wish I had been a little bit more aware and prepared of what the reality actually was.
Just a response to that something. I think it's super interesting around the honest conversations or lack thereof around what to expect, and I guess if you even have access to spaces that can bring those kind of conversations before.
Yeah, sorry, I forgot to mention one thing that has actually helped me through this time. If I don't see it on mainstream media, I follow a lot of parenting accounts on social media, so things that help me actually navigate my toddler's feelings, like Big Little Feelings, or mothers who are influencers, like Milena Ciciotti, I can never say her name, or Chelsea King, who talk about the real honest truth. I think that's so empowering for someone who's going through similar situations. So yeah, there are accounts out there. I just feel like more mothers need to be more aware that they exist so that they're not so isolated and don't feel so alone. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, mainstream media, no, I don't think it's still a long way to go. And again, people where I come from, Pakistani Muslim, I don't think see many of those representations in today's media. And I think the change is happening, like the recent Miss Marvel film, for example, the TV show representing a Muslim superhero. I think things like that is happening, but I think it's still a long way to go, and I think we still need to do. There's so much work that needs to be done, and I think this is why more women, more representation is needed in businesses and in organizations, because we need to be heard, and we are the ones who are going to bring the ideas, and we are the ones who are going to be the, open the pathways for other minorities and underrepresented.
Yeah, it's, I feel mixed about this. From a kind of mainstream point of view, you can see that big companies are obviously trying to become a little bit more diverse in their representation. Christmas adverts are trying to, I guess, show a slightly different perspective. Social media, I think there are a lot of families that are cataloguing their kind of daily lives, and a lot of young ones who are cataloguing their daily lives. But I feel like it's still wrapped up in an unrealistic beauty standard, often heavily filtered. I don't know if it's necessarily covering everything, and if I necessarily feel represented. And I don't know how we better make that, happen. Interestingly enough, if you follow accounts like SheSays, you get an impression of what a lot of women are still facing harm, being mothers, and also abuse. So yeah, it depends on where you look in terms of representation. I think there's a lot more to be done.
Thank you. I'm going to give Amy a break now, and I'm going to move on to the second part of our discussion. First of all, I just want to say thank you so much to all of you for sharing so openly and honestly. It's really, I think part of the reason we wanted to have this event is because we don't feel necessarily that there's enough space given to have these open conversations. I feel like I was saying, it's really filtered. It's often you don't really get a chance to be open and talk about what it's really like, and sometimes it's not all sunshine and rainbows, and it's really difficult. So thank you so much for really leaning into that. It makes it such a rich conversation. We've kind of touched a little bit about how we felt about when it comes to the mainstream media, but I would love to kind of maybe look forward together and see what do we think, if there's a kind of a vision that we can co-create together, or maybe suggest some positive things that we can do as a collective, as people who are working in the industry, to kind of create a bit of a new status quo. So like, for example, you mentioned the Mother Care campaign, which is an example of a positive representation of motherhood and a kind of no holds barred, non-filtered one. So, I mean, I would love to just know for everyone here, what do you think the kind of learnings are from your collective experiences that we can maybe put forward to businesses or to just general people in society to move forward and really make this experience of caregiving and motherhood a more positive one as we kind of evolve going forward. That's kind of open to anyone that wants to respond. Do you want to take the mic?
Yeah. Absolutely having an open conversation and being honest, even in the companies where you work. The businesses do need to initiate help and support groups. Like I was working at Industrial Light Magic, I don't work there anymore, but the best thing about them, they did initiate these ERG groups for mental health, for women and LGBT community and people who are disabled. So having those groups and someone's leading them is able to bring those people together and have conversations with them, even if they don't want to openly speak about it, but within the groups. I think it's so important to hear those other people who are struggling. I think that will bring a change for the starters, and I think again things like this that we're doing is so important in VFX, it's a heavily male-dominated industry. And when I started back in 2006, I was the only girl when I started, and like the only person of color. But now, I've come this far, I see the change is happening, and there are people making it happen. People like you, who come together, organize things like this. There's a very amazing organization called Access VFX, and within the VFX industry, they're representing all the minorities, people from different cultures, people of color, people who have disabilities or LGBT. You know, they are providing mentorships and those kind of programs for those people. And I think these are the things that's gonna bring everyone together. And also, I think it's important to go to have these events also scheduled in schools and colleges where young kids can see representations as well. I've done some talks. I've gone to schools where a school in London once I did a talk and presentation, and it was a class of all girls. They were all 11 and 12. And it was so amazing. They got so involved in the subject that all the graphics and digital content we had in films. They were asking so many questions that how do you do this? And you see that, but they are women, they are girls who want to learn, they are doing courses, they are being educated, but then you see a drop in the business, you see in the actual workplace, in the industry, you don't see many women. So there's a gap, and that's what we need to fill. We need to educate, show the representation, and then also in companies, the change. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more. I think it's really about making sure that you're speaking your truth if you're going through struggles and things, and making sure that whatever your working environment is, that you're getting the support that you need. And if it's not there, create it. Like, I've come very close to sort of starting Slack channels, for parents or mums, and just getting people talking and understanding, what we're all going through. And there are so many similarities that end up bubbling up, which is really, really helpful. Also, I think, love SheSays and everything that is about, growing up with it from an early stage of my career, and it's incredible to be like on a panel here now as a mother. But yeah, I think, bringing that into the workplace and just never forgetting the power of sisterhood. And even now, if I take some of the projects that I'm on, it's with other mums, and we have time where we're like, right, this project is killer. The client is putting on some really hefty demands, but we're clocking off now, 5 till 7. It's our kid time. We'll be back on at 7. And people, they get it. They're like, of course, the years when they're really young, they get them so quickly, and you don't want to be skipping bath time. You don't want to be skipping story time. Don't feel fearful. Make sure that you get the balance that you need to be happy, I think.
I completely agree with both of you in terms of definitely support needs to be put in the workplaces, but I actually also think that companies need to be the change. I need to understand why I, as a young single parent, am struggling so much to get work when I'm trying so hard. That's because there's a lack of resources, there's a lack of options, lack of bursaries, of proper support there, even though there are things that I'm so grateful that I can get child benefit and universal credit and all these things to help, but in terms of actually being able to work in what I want to work, I feel like companies need to put more in place. I imagine, I'm thinking big, but I imagine a world where companies, can be in partnership with some sort of childcare company, and I would be able to drop my child off and be able to work right next to it and be able to pick her up. Something like that in the future would make parents' lives so much easier. And I don't know, I feel like there's so much more I can suggest, because there's so much more that needs to be done. I don't feel like people deserve to be in a place where they're struggling just to survive and make a life for themselves that they can actually live and actually enjoy and be able to support their children. And especially like you mentioned, spending time with them, it's so important that they're actually cared for as well as in balancing that work life, and that people respect that and that they understand that. Also, in terms of representation, I look forward to the day where I don't have to tick other as my ethnicity on a form. I am tired of that, and I do not want my daughter to go through the same thing. I love the fact that now, you know, Disney has made a film about Colombia, and for her 3rd birthday she got to dress up as a character from Disney that was representing her, and she identifies with that, and I was like, I never got to have that growing up, and I'm so happy that you do. You know, my mother is my rock, my strength, like you mentioned. She is my biggest inspiration. If I think I've had it hard, my struggles are nothing compared to hers, and she made it happen. But she struggled so much. I'm struggling a bit less, and I want to get to the point where my daughter doesn't have to struggle at all, and things are put into place so she can live a smooth, happy, and accepting life in this world and in this industry.
I think I don't know that I have very much more to add. I feel like what panellists touched on is, you know, it resonates with me. I just think really, as you say, companies, it really sits with companies. Indeed, there seems to be a lot of emphasis on professional development, but you know, it should be more emphasis on the balance, work-life balance, and you know, how are they making that not just being a one-off request, but being integrated as part of your kind of general work life. So I think I'm going to have to go back and speak to my and just see how we can just make this more integrated and not feel like it is just ad hoc requests. Yeah.
I think you've just, all of you have raised such really interesting things, and it's really, what's really coming through is this idea of like struggle and self-sacrifice that seems to be kind of associated with caring. It's like you can't be thriving and caring for someone, you have to be like depleting yourself in order to care for someone. So I think everything that you've said kind of really speaks to a need to be supported and, you know, just be uplifted. It shouldn't have to be this difficult. I'm not saying that caring isn't hard. I mean, actually one of our panellists that was due to come along today, she had to drop out because she was up with a poorly toddler, you know, so these things happen, but, you know, as far as possible, it should not be made even harder by the lack of resource, by the lack of support. And I think one of the other things that you touched on as well is just this, I guess, social perception. You know, it maybe feels quite difficult to do it alongside this sort of continuous tide of negative perception. So I also really hope that caring and caregiving is given a more positive spin going forward, because it is a really hard and admirable job and not many people do it. So you should feel really proud that you are. So I guess to maybe take a little bit more of a point of view on it, if you had to suggest like one thing in a specific work context that would make your life easier, if you had a magic wand, because I love that Keiddy was just like, I'm going to do this, I don't care what's going to happen, I want to make this happen. If you just had no holds barred, if nothing was an issue, what would be your one thing that would really like improve your experience as a carer or as a parent? Open to anyone who wants to go. Jade?
I think I would say, particularly for like, you know, the bigger companies now, let's face it, all agencies are becoming part of the group, like, you know, they're supported. I think unlimited paid time off if you need it for your family. You know, like words can take you a long way, and we have a great mantra at AKQA, which is family first. Like when anything happens, it's like family first, which is so good. But I know there will come a point, you know, where it's sort of like there's only a certain amount of paid time off you can get.
But client also.
So yeah, I think that will really help people, and you know, even now for me, like as my career's kind of progressed, like now I'm just more of a manager, like line managing people, and there's people on my team where I see the struggle is real. Like they've got 2 kids, and one was off again, like a hospital incident, and then we're coming into winter season, kids getting ill, getting coughs and colds, and the parents get it, you know. And she was like, I can't be ill again. And how do you cope with that? The pressure of of what's happening at home and trying to focus on, you know, doing the tasks at work. It's all intertwined. So I think, yeah, if companies brought that in, I think that would really help a lot of parents alleviate the stress of paying for nursery and then potentially not having a salary. Like that's yeah, strong.
The point I made earlier obviously is one of them, like, let me not worry about picking my daughter up and having to drop her off. But alongside that, like now entering the industry, I have to ask about my working hours and flexible working. I want them to be even more flexible in terms of like, I will get the job done, but I will only be able to, if I'm in the office, I'll only be able to be there for 5 hours or less, you know. I'm a single parent, I need to be able to drop off my daughter and pick her up, especially if I'm commuting into work. It's really hard right now. Like I'm still looking for a job. My daughter's been gone 3 months now, and I've been trying this whole time, and it's been a struggle. You know, I'm making things happen, working freelance, but there still needs to be more in place. And I guess, yeah, if there was something available that meant that I didn't have to stress so much about childcare and how I'm going to be able to make it work, and that was put in place by a company itself, and they had that understanding and empathy, and I feel that would be such a big stress lifted off my shoulders, and that also my mum's shoulders, because, you know, she has to be travelling back and forth, and she's obviously worried about her granddaughter and who's going to be looking after her. And I'm definitely not in a place where I can leave her with just any friend or any stranger. You know, that's your life. You gave life to this person. You're responsible for them. So, yeah, I think that's it. Yeah.
If I could just jump in there briefly, I just want to say as well, like one of the best experiences I've had working with someone is someone who was a mother. She was so efficient. We had like a very clear schedule. She'd be like, I need to jump up at this time, I'll come back at this time. And I would really love to see, like you say, have more businesses see the value of that, because, you know, you're wrangling a small person and getting your job done. That means you're super efficient. Like your productivity is off the scale already. So I definitely had a really, really positive experience. So I really echo that, because I think the fact that she was being given the flexibility to manage her little one and also do a job, it just meant both of that productivity was so good, it was so strong, and we had a really good understanding. So, you know, I would really wish that experience for more people, because it was such a dream. And also actually the fact that she was working a bit later meant that I woke up in the morning sometimes, it was done. It's like, you know, I had a magic person on the other side just doing stuff in the background. So yeah, I would really echo that. I think that makes so much sense. Yeah.
Sorry. No, I want to actually say definitely childcare. I was reading this morning that the cost of childcare has risen by 4% in the last year, and it's potentially over £7,000 a year to have a child in nursery. So that just seems staggering, like prohibitive. And if you're trying to work, you know, full time or even part time, it's a really big kind of financial obstacle. And I don't see why companies can potentially even cap like a certain allowance, you know, just help in some way in terms of the costs, and you can then access that as a resource. I feel like that is something that's quite easy. You can book childcare via an app now. I'm not sure why. Yeah, it would be something that companies can investigate and how they can support. An added benefit, yeah, even if it's capped, you know.
Yeah, I agree completely. I think having more time off from work and more part-time options available, more flexibility. I absolutely love the idea if you have a nursery in the company, a room maybe where kids can play and you know, parents can leave their kids. A company providing a childminder. This is just like a dream, isn't it? And stuff like that. And I think getting more time off. Like I've taken time off now, and I'm just having a blast with my son, honestly, because I was so burnt out, so overworked, and I was so overwhelmed this year with the pandemic, with the care duties and the work I do is so demanding. I just took a step back, and I don't know how I'm gonna figure it out, but I will figure it out at the end of the day, finances and everything. But it's I just need time off, and it's so rewarding when you get to spend that time with your son, with with your kids, being able to go out and seeing, just him smiling and being happy, exploring things on the other side, because I'm able to give him exposing those things to experience at this age. And we've been traveling a bit, and he's absolutely loving it. So to see that at this age, making memories, I think is so important that we are given that chance more and more of.
Any closing comments from anyone before we kind of round up? Yeah.
I've really enjoyed today's discussion, and it's just it reiterates that it's important to talk about these things. So many of the panelists, have similar experiences, and not met anyone prior to this. So it's just important to have that conversation and collaborate.
Thank you so much for this panel. It's been so insightful and so nice to be able to share experiences and know that I'm not alone in this. And I think I kind of just want to reiterate to mothers and carers out there that even though we've kind of touched on a lot of the struggles and a lot of the hardships and the realities of what comes with being a carer and working, it's still possible. There's still things that we can do. There's still help available out there. There does need to be more done, but it shouldn't scare you and it shouldn't stop you from doing what you want to do, because it is possible. We're all here and we've made it work. As tough as it has been, we have made it work, and I'm sure that we've all had positive experiences from the support that we've received in some senses. Just kind of, if any mothers and carers out there are listening, there are still good things that come from being a mother and being a creative and a worker. Thank you.
I think it's just been incredible to let everyone be able to speak their truth and hear different stories and perspectives. It's amazing, and I think something that you touched upon, Jade, that let's not forget that you can be a mother, a parent, and an inspiring leader. And I've definitely worked for a few women who ECD level and have been juggling children and been honest, been on the pitch and said, sorry, my kid's broken their leg, I need to go home. And that's the reality. But the work still gets done, they still turn up, and it's so inspiring to see. So I think there's that. And then there's this quote that I always come back to, which is we can always sort of underestimate what we can, we overestimate what we can achieve in a year and underestimate what we can achieve in 10 years. And I think there's patches as being a parent where it feels like, oh my goodness, I'm in a turmoil of madness, how am I going to continue on? But I think this is why we're talking about the support, because you just need that support sometimes to lift you out, whether it's your own mum or relying on work to help you out and support you, and then you keep going. And I think I would encourage everyone to remember that you just have to keep going and get the support when you need it, keep going, and before you know it, you're getting that balance that you need. Oh, sorry.
Just add something really briefly as well. Just the power that is in men also really pushing to exercise their rights to care and take time off and be very active. I think that's something that, as an industry, we can push for, through the creative work that we have, through conversations that we have, through policies, all of these sorts of things, and also in our friend circles. So I think that's definitely something from my perspective I'd love to see a lot more of. My boss, he is very active in bringing up his 2 children, and I love for him how honest he is about it. We'll be on a Zoom call, he'll be in the bedroom with one kid doing this, one kid doing that, and it's just great. It makes me feel like, okay, I'm in the right place. So those sorts of examples are just, really, really, really crucial. So, I would just say to everyone to be having those conversations with men, and I think that's definitely part of the change.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with you. Seriously, I mean, first of all, thank you again for having me, and arranging this is so, I feel this is so important and vital to bring that change. And I think, yeah, I completely agree with the point you just made, that maybe having, you know, men also involved in these organization groups and stuff and events where they're open to listening. And also, this is the main thing we're doing, is making everyone aware of the struggles we are all, even each other, what we are going through. It's just talking about this makes such a difference. So I think if they are also actively involved, I think that would be one of the best things to, yeah.
Do we want to have any questions? Does anyone that's here want to ask any questions? Anna? Or we've got someone around the corner that I can't see.
All reflections
All
as well.
reflections on what we
And I
learned
can come
today.
over to you.
No?
You guys are really inspiring. You say that. That's what I've got to say. No.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's good to hear that.
Yeah, so the person who just said that were really inspiring is my boyfriend. So touching on what you said, it's been really important for us to have sort of open conversations about the reality of, you know, I've been a single parent for 3 years, and it's been really great to be able to speak to him about that level of understanding needed of what it actually takes to be a single mother and the struggles that come with it, and what it means to be a part of our life. And you know, with him and with my friends, you know, they come into my life with certain beliefs and perceptions, and being able to have open conversations sort of gives me the space to tell the truth and for them to understand it and then apply it as well. And if we are able to have these open and honest conversations like you both mentioned, it creates that immediate and instant change and makes things so much easier, you know. So yeah, very grateful for you.
I just wanted to say something around I just wanted to say something around the fear of having children as a creative freelancer, and how that's kind of these kinds of conversations are really important for people who are not carers and who are not parents, just to see the kind of the plurality of voices and kind of the different experiences that exist out there, really, because I don't feel like these conversations are had outside of parenthood. So it's really important for people outside of it, and men in particular, who don't understand anything about parenting as of yet, because I have a warped idea of men only understand parenting. But I'm just really grateful that I'm part of this, and hopefully I'll have conversations with people in my group of friends that are also kind of fearful of becoming parents because of this kind of balancing act of absolutely work. So
Thank you. Anyone else at all?
Any reflection?
No, it's just really interesting to hear all of your experiences. Thank you. I was just going to say thank you for sharing all your experiences. It's been really interesting as a new mum still on maternity leave and like really apprehensive about going back to work and how I'm going to juggle it all. So it's really interesting to hear how you've all dealt with that and kind of strategies that you've employed. So thank you very much.
And thank you for bringing your little one.
Oh, sorry,
as
Mr.
well.
Disruptive.
I think this might be our youngest attendee so far. Great, so I think that's a wrap. Thank you so much for coming along to join us this morning in the rain. And this will be available live on our YouTube channel, and also it's been on our Instagram live, which will be, so we'll be making a playback of this available shortly after this, so that anyone who wasn't able to join us in the room in person today can still catch up on some of the conversations, and hopefully we can kind of spread more of this kind of honest conversation further afield, not just in this room, but just amongst yourselves and your own personal circle. So thank you so much for joining us.